Let's look at our key terms of vocabulary. The domain is the input or x values of a graph. It is how far the graph goes on the x-axis, or how far left does it go and how far right does it go. The range is the output or the y values of a graph. It is how far, or actually how high or how low the graph goes on the y-axis. Remember, the y-axis is the vertical graph. X-axis is the horizontal axis. The intercepts are the point where the graph crosses or touches the x-axis or the y-axis. So I'm going to show you that look at this slide right here. For example, look at the x-axis. That's this line right here, this horizontal line right here. It goes through 0. Those are the x-intercepts. The y-intercepts are where the graph crosses the y-axis. So there's one y-intercept here, and there are two x-intercepts. X-intercept between 5 and 6, and there's one at between -5 and -4. Those are the x-intercepts. They're also called the roots or zeros or solutions. Then you have the y-intercept, and the y-intercept in this graph is 3. So then you also have the maximum and minimum, which is the highest and lowest points of the graph. So the maximum of a function is the largest function value, and the minimum of a function is the smallest function value. So basically, you're looking at the y-axis. So what I'm talking about. So here in this graph, the minimum, the lowest point of the graph right here is the minimum value. It occurs where x is equal to -4. And the value of it, if you look at the y-axis, which is kind of hidden, is -3. If you look at the maximum, the highest point on the graph, it occurs when x is equal to -2, and the maximum value is about 6. Okay. You also have the axis of symmetry. This is the line through its shape so that each side is a mirror image. It divides the graph into two identical pieces. So look at that. You could fold the graph along this line and you get the same thing. So that's basically what it is. So notice that the third graph is not symmetric, while this sine curve and this parabola are. Okay? And here's the rest of your vocabulary terms. You got asymptote, a line that the graph approaches or y as x and y increases in absolute value. And asymptotic behavior is a graph that approaches an asymptote, exhibits asymptotic behavior. Matter of fact, any graph that has an asymptote behaves that way. What I recommend that you do, that you can pause this video and review and read these to yourself, just to refamiliarize yourselves with them, and also the other parts of this this video to kind of just bring you up to speed of what was covered in Algebra 2. Some of this stuff like asymptotes, we just touched on it a little bit. The cubic parent function, that's something probably new for you. That's in Algebra 2. Reciprocal parent function, that's new. So you'll get into that slowly but surely as we get through these courses. All right, so you feel free to stop the video and pause this. Okay, I'm going to the next slide though. Here are graphs of your parent functions. In Algebra 1, you talked about quadratic functions, and you should be familiar with this one. All right, and notice that its attributes, it intersects that y-axis at 0, 0. Its domain is all real numbers. That means it goes all the way, continues to the left forever, continues to the right forever. But if you look at the range, it doesn't continue forever. It has a lowest point, which is 0 on the y-axis, and then it goes up from there. So the range is just from all real numbers bigger than or equal to 0. All right, we'll be talking about the square root function more in about a week or so, but we're going to kind of introduce it today, and so you'll see that's what the graph looks like. and you'll discover that it intersects the x-axis, y-axis at 0, 0. That's where it kind of starts. All right. So feel free to pause the video and get familiar with this. Here are some more apparent functions. The reciprocal function. Look how they're shaped. Absolute value function. All right. The and just notice the attributes there. Again, you feel pause the video at any time. And also we have the exponential function, which was talked about hopefully in Algebra 1. And then the logarithmic function, which is new. So which you will hopefully, we will get to, we'll do quite a bit with logs, as a matter of fact. And so this is just some of the parent functions that we're going to become very familiar with. Okay? And you also have the cubic function, and we have the cube root function there. Okay, I know we got some extra thing. We're not going to talk much about the general forms of those, but when we start transforming it, it'll become a little more you'll become more comfortable with it. But don't let these scare you. We just want you to know what they look like. So when you graph, you ought to be able to tell if a function is what type of function it is. So a quadratic function, these are the ones that we're going to focus on. The graph of a quadratic function is a U-shaped curve called a parabola. One important feature of the graph is that it has an extreme point called a vertex. If the parabola opens up, the vertex represents the lowest point on the graph or the minimum value of the graph of the quadratic function. If the parabola opens downward, the vertex represents the highest point on the graph, the maximum value. In either case, the vertex is a turning point on the graph. The graph is also symmetric with a vertical line drawn through the vertex called the axis of symmetry. This was something that was just covered in Algebra 1. Here's what it looks like. And as you can see, the vertex is that point, the lowest point on the graph. It's either going to be the lowest or the highest point. Notice that the axis of symmetry, which cuts a graph in half, goes right through the vertex. Notice that you have in this particular graph, you have two x-intercepts, so zeros, and you have a y-intercept at 3. They don't mark it, but it is there. And that's what it looks like. Quadratic function always has an x squared term in it or some squared term in it. All right. So here's an example of being able to fully describe a graph. You can pause this and just look at it and verify that all this is true. Vertex is -1, -2 right here at the bottom. The x-intercepts is one at 0, 0, and there's one at -2, 0. There's a y-intercept at 0, 0. Okay, and we've already talked about the minimum. Notice that the minimum is the vertex in this case. The vertex will always be a minimum or a maximum. The axis symmetry is that vertical line where x is equal to -1. It goes right through the center. And then, of course, we talk about the roots, solutions, and zeros, the rocks. They're all the same. Okay. All right. So that's give you a little what's over of what we reviewed in Algebra 1. And I hope this video was helpful in refreshing you. Feel free to contact me. The Zoom is still open. If you have questions, make sure you can contact me either in Google Classroom or the Zoom while we're still in class if you have further questions.